Non-GMO. You've probably heard of this phrase, on the news or in a supermarket. Non-GMO means a product that was produced without genetic engineering and in any form derived from GMOs. However, the truth is GMOs do not have any indication that it is harmful to human health. Then what is GMO and what makes it such an opposed technology to the public? GMO stands for genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified organisms are organisms whose genome is engineered from organisms whose genetic material has been modified in a way that does not occur naturally. In other words, GMOs are living organisms whose genetic material has been artificially manipulated in a laboratory. I chose this technology because it plays a constructive role in our society, particularly in our agriculture and survival. Furthermore, as a person who likes to debate and tackle complex ideas in our world, I am more passionate to dig deeper into the various branches of GMO. GMO was first invented in the early 1970s, more specifically in 1973 by Herbert Boyer and Stanley Cohen. Before GMO was invented, for thousands of years, humans have utilized traditional modification methods such as selective breeding and crossbreeding. Herbert Boyer and Stanley Cohen were successful in developing methods to specifically cut out a gene from one organism and pass it into another, to encode antibiotic resistance from one strain of bacteria into another. 1 year later, Rudolf Janisch and Beatrice Mintz, two American molecular biologists, created the first genetically modified organism, a genetically modified mouse model. This mouse model consisted of the SV40 virus in their embryo to test human diseases on animal models. The purpose of genetic engineering is to favor the expression of desired physiological traits or the generation of desired biological products. They go through the process of recombinant DNA technology and reproductive cloning. Recombinant DNA technology is the insertion of one or more individual genes from an organism of one species into the DNA of another. This technology requires collective techniques such as cloning genes, splicing DNA segments, and inserting genes into cells to be accomplished. Reproductive cloning is the process of extracting the nucleus from a cell of an individual to be cloned and inserted into the cytoplasm of a host egg. The rise of GMO technology has influenced the agriculture industry to develop rapidly and use more efficient ways than traditional breeding methods to breed all sorts of organisms. However, this unfamiliar technology immediately raised concerns of danger from the media, government officials, and scientists. This resulted in the Asilmore Conference in 1975 being debated for 3 days before concluding that genetically modified projects should be allowed to continue with certain guidelines in place. The original ruling aimed to settle concerns of GE technology emerged into legally permitting ownership rights over GMOs, giving large companies the incentive to rapidly develop GMO tools that could both be useful and profitable. Soon, in 1982, the Food and Drug Administration approved the first human medication produced by a genetically modified organism, Humulin, which quickly escalated into the Calgene's flavor saver tomato, becoming the first food crop to be approved for commercial production by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1987. As the GMO industry grew, in 1995, the first pesticide-producing crop was approved by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which brought a change of allowing crops to be easily controlled and maintaining herbicide-resistant crops engineered by Monsanto in 1996. These leads to 2009, where the FDA approved the first biological product produced by genetically engineered animals. Before the invention of GMOs, traditional breeding methods were largely used in agriculture, but the process of breeding particularly plants were inconvenient. Traditional breeding, or also called conventional breeding, develops new plant varieties through the process of selection and seeks to achieve expression of genetic material which is already present with a species. Traditional breeding methods have a smaller scope of gene transfers, as it is not possible to transfer genes between any organisms. Secondly, the location of gene insertion differs between the two technologies. GMO can control relatively and precisely the trait that is being inserted into a host plant through the process of transformation, and this method allows the genome to transform or inject the other host. Furthermore, the movement of vectors designed to move and express genes across species and ecological barriers are restrained in traditional breeding methods, while they are granted all the power they can get in GMO. GMO is accomplished through 3 separate steps. First, the isolation of DNA fragments from a host organism. Second, the insertion of an isolated host DNA fragment into the vector genome. And lastly, the growth of a recombinant vector in an appropriate host. Modern agriculture requires GMOs to take a constructive role to further enhance the agriculture industry. Major benefits that GMO brings to modern agriculture are: first, shrinking the environmental footprint. GMOs enable farmers to grow massive amounts of crops with less land, fewer pesticides, less water, and necessary resources. Second, lowering the price of food. GMOs will help keep food production costs down, resulting in lower prices for consumers. Third, alleviating hunger and malnutrition around the world. With a growing human population, GMOs will help maintain the pace of agriculture development by increasing productivity. Fourth, GMOs enable season-long production such as insect resistance, drought resistance, herbicide tolerance, disease resistance, and more. Fifth, enabling medical benefits for the growing population. Biotechnology crops will provide the decrease of agriculturally related greenhouse gas emissions, soil erosion, and substantially decrease the use of many toxic agriculture chemicals. Other than the benefits GMOs has presented, it has also presented possibilities of future consequences that concern the public. Firstly, GMOs is opposed by the public due to their philosophical and religious concerns. GMO is described as a posing threat because it deals with DNA, an organism's essence that causes the organism's behavior and development and determines its identity. According to scientificamerican.com, the general public to GMO is labeled as a psychological essentialism. It is defined as having an underlying reality that cannot be observed directly, therefore allows people to have stereotypes and emotions of fear or disgust for GMOs despite that they do not understand the topic at all. Secondly, horizontal gene transfer, also known as HGT, is another reason that the public opposes GMOs. Horizontal gene transfer is a non-sexual movement of genetic information between genomes. Incoming DNA or RNA can replace existing genes or can introduce new genes into a genome. People fear the small possibility of consequences HGT technology might introduce to nature. Science has proposed that altering the natural state of an organism through foreign gene expression can result in the change in the organism's metabolism, growth rate, and or response to the external environment. On top of that, cause ecological imbalances, allow plants to grow uncontrollably, and promote the spread of diseases, making nearly all organisms vulnerable. Thirdly, the major case that has sparked the greatest controversy of GMO's influence on other species and organisms within the public is the Bt corn controversy. Bt corn is a genetically modifying corn that is created to resist pests and tolerate herbicides. This GE corn didn't receive controversy until a laboratory study by Losey in 1999 that resulted in the mortality of monarch larvae was influenced by the Bt corn pollen. Additionally, in 1999, publications stated that the usage of GMOs has brought negative effects to the butterfly populations in laboratory tests. However, both of these pieces of evidence have been debunked by future scientists who claim that the 1999 laboratory test of the monarch larvae wasn't realistic as it consisted of a highly concentrated amount of pollen. Furthermore, the effect GMO has on butterfly populations has been tested in actual farming fields and has proved there was no such harm done to these populations. Lastly, as the accessibility of GMOs enlarges in our society, private companies claim ownership of the organisms they create and not share them at a reasonable cost with the public. This will result in the future large-scale farm production centers dominating other small farmers who can't afford the technology or accessibility. However, this controversy has also been debunked recently by the meta-analysis of 15 studies, which have revealed that most of the benefit shares of GMO technology are distributed in both industrial and developing countries. GMOs has already brought humanity endless benefits and potentials. These potentials will be able to enhance the influence GMOs has on various sectors of the world, most particularly on future agriculture. GMOs will enable the wild use of new and sophisticated technologies that will allow the agricultural industry to be more profitable, efficient, safe, and environmentally friendly in the future. For instance, enhancing even higher nutrition in our consumptions, tolerance in even the slightest changes to plants and animals, resistance in all diseases currently existing, biofuels that will allow crops to produce necessary materials for our use, phytoremediation, enabling plants to extract and concentrate contaminants like heavy metals from polluted sites. Farmers are the most directly affected by GMOs. In other words, all the benefits of GMOs develop the modern agriculture industry. The more benefits GMOs bring for modern agriculture, it enables farmers to use advanced technology and efficient methods to increase the productivity and quality of modern agriculture. To advance modern agriculture technology, large corporations take the role of developing countries with genetically modified organisms. GMO plays the role of attracting the attention of major biotech companies to smallholder farmers in countries and providing them with education, training, agriculture and information technologies, storage for fresh products, transportation infrastructure, workers, and more. Not only does GMOs intertwine two industries that vary in size, but it makes sure that the other cannot live without the other. Therefore, this means that biotech companies will not be able to operate unless they have a reciprocal relationship with farmers. However, farmers are also affected by the unintended and intended consequences upon the arrival of GMOs. Concentration in corporate power, where biotech companies can hold power and exploit their expansion of seed production by suing farmers with seed piracy on their fields to hide their technologies and strategies from being researched by others. Contamination and economic loss, where the genetic drift, the movement between organisms allowing GMO plants to move to neighboring fields, may cause problems such as contamination. This may spark dramatic economic losses for farmers who face rejection from export markets that ban GMOs and may also lose their organic certification and the premium they earn for their organic crop. Super weeds and super pests, where some pests or weeds might become immune to specific plants that promise the benefit of GMO technology and make GMO's ability useless in modern agriculture. Lack of biodiversity. According to FarmAid, genetic diversity helps individual species to adjust to new conditions, diseases, and pests, and can aid ecosystems in adapting to a changing environment or severe conditions like the drought or floods. Therefore, if the tolerance of a crucial crop for human survival is vulnerable, a large group of people will have to suffer. Patents, where biotech companies have the power to make it mandatory for farmers who buy GMO seeds to pay licensing fees and sign contracts that dictate how they can grow the crop, and even allow seed companies to inspect their farms, according to FarmAid. Food chains are affected by the controversies of GMOs. GMOs affect food chains by altering their natural state and process of survival, either positively or negatively. According to government.nl, GMO can bring unintended effects on the dynamics of populations in the receiving environment as a result of impacts on non-target species, which may occur directly by predation or competition, or indirectly by changes in land use or farming practices, as well as unintended effects on biogeochemistry and its relationship to nature. All organisms may be affected to be beneficial towards humanity. These may allow organisms to experience alterations in the environment, living habitats, relationships with other organisms, and more. Along with the benefits of various resistance and tolerances, but also the negative components such as invasive species and superweeds and superpests. In conclusion, GMOs can stabilize and disturb the balance of the food chain. GMOs affect religious groups and individuals by provoking concerns and oppositions towards their purpose. the component of being able to control genetic material in organisms resemble the right to play God for certain people. According to Nature.com, some people believe that tampering with nature is intrinsically wrong, and others maintain that inserting plant genes in animals or vice versa is immoral. While other religious groups and individuals are concerned that the advancement of GMOs is simply assaulting the human body, in other words, violating ethical beliefs. Moreover, religious groups and individuals use the popular term Frankenfood to warn, by going against the will of nature in an act of hubris, we are bound to bring enormous disaster upon ourselves. However, currently, the major religious groups, the Roman Catholic Church, Islam, Protestant churches, Judaism, and Hinduism, have shown approval of genetic engineering to an extent in the appreciation of nature, human rights, and God are maintained. As a matter of fact, various religious cultures have shown and underpinned to a considerable extent the value of life and direction that science and technology should take in respect, according to journal.sagepub. We are now able to acknowledge that GMO plays a constructive role in developing society's various components to be profitable, efficient, safe, and environmentally friendly for humanity's future.